Our movie begins when the alarm goes off in Abby's room. She wakes up and she uses her voice to turn on the light, and she silences the alarm and checks what's going on. And apparently something is going on with this auxiliary unit in the south. And this unit is some kind of device that purifies the air because there was a nuclear blast that happened years ago. There was an energy crisis in the world, and this company called Auxilison stepped up and fixed most of the problems. And Abby is an employee there, and she's a very responsible employee too. She decides to personally go to the location and investigate the system to put it back online. She gets to the location with this really pissed off pilot, and she tells him to leave after she lands there because she really doesn't want to return with this guy. I think he was angry because it was Christmas and she made him fly there. Yeah. And inside the auxiliary unit, she enters the building through the main door, and since the sensors were broken, she steps in front of the machine to manually disinfect herself. And after that, she determines the temperature inside and takes off her safety helmet, and she pulls out her tablet and she informs her department that she discovered the area in a very unexpectedly neglectful condition, and that she will report back when communication is restored. And inside this unit, Abby hears some noise coming from some direction, and she follows the sound and she gets to this place where there's a table and it was covered with documents. As she was going through the documents, she turns around to see that there's a man holding a hockey stick positioned to strike her. She attempts to identify herself as an engineer and that she's here to regain the communication system that failed. And she also tells him that she's the only person sent from the department as she scans her ID and she displays it to him. He then introduces himself as the caretaker Robinson Scott, and she asks him where Dr. Zek is, and this Robinson guy replies that Dr. Zek went out on this surveying mission and he doesn't know when he will return. And as they were speaking, an alarm goes off and she panics and claims that something is wrong as she rushes to check the equipment. But he dismisses it, saying that he has everything under control. The alarm then stops when he lowers the machine's primary handle. And in a bit, she asks him to show her to her room because she feels a little uneasy about this guy. And after showing her around, he departs claiming that the corner room is hers. And she makes a bunch of scans before she goes to bed. And in a while, after getting dressed, Abby gets her tablet and other supplies, and she departs for her mission. She walks around looking for Robinson, and then she hears some music coming from the adjacent room. And then she goes there to find Robinson, thinking that it's probably him there. And after she found him, she needs to keep in touch with him throughout the entire institution. And so she gives him this communication device. And Robinson continues to follow her around to see what she's doing as she places various devices around the area to determine what the problem is actually. He asks about her department as he guides her around the building, and Abby replies that she doesn't work for a particular department. She tells him that she's based at the HQ. And after they got to the large laboratory, she informs him that the enormous fan on the Auxilison is a cooling system and they check it out. Abby starts guiding Robinson through the system, and Robinson inquires curiously about what will happen if the fan quits operating. And the woman answers that the room will fill with gas like a nuclear bomb if both fans cease to work. After asking her a bunch of more annoying questions, Robinson leaves Abby's side coughing, and she doesn't really notice him as she was doing her thing, and when she hears this loud stump, she goes to check for him and she finds him on the floor. Abby wakes him up by tapping on his face a little bit, and later in her room, Abby reports that Dr. Zek is AWOL. He's nowhere to be found, and that the caretaker is not really cooperative, and that the communication is very, very poor. And in the next scene, we see a young girl named Abby looking for something down an empty hallway, and she sees this elderly woman dying in a hospital, and a grown man grabs her by the shoulders and pulls her out of the nightmare. And as she was taking a shower to cool off, she notices Robinson stalking her. And down in the kitchen, as he was making coffee, Abby enters and he apologizes for his actions, explaining that he was alone for quite some time and that's why he acted the way that he did. He's never really had visitors before. He gives her some coffee, she starts to have her breakfast, and she talks about Dr. Zek, but he's not really interested in talking about that. And she's not really interested in hearing about his family, but he just talks about them. And later, Abby discovers that the facility's power lines were intentionally severed and that the red zone danger area protected by the trifusion engine appears to be expanding. And as night went on, Abby informs the institution that she will recalibrate everything herself since she's really worried that Dr. Zek has gone missing now. And as she was recalibrating everything using a laser, she turns around because she felt something and she notices someone outside. And Abby confronts Robinson about what he's not telling her, and Robinson tells her that Dr. Zek actually kind of went mad because of sensory deprivation because he was out here for so long, and he may also have been exposed to radiation in the deep burial containment chamber. And Robinson also tells her that Dr. Zek, in his last days, was claiming that he did something and he was pretty excited about it. And then Robinson tries to get inside her head, claiming that maybe she's hallucinating as well, and maybe she didn't see anyone outside. But she doesn't really question herself, and she tells him that she did see someone and she's not hallucinating. But in a moment, she remains silent, contemplating that maybe he could be right. Maybe I am hallucinating. And then Robinson leaves and plays golf outside, and Abby goes around using her devices in search of Dr. Zek, just monitoring everything. And she hears somebody breathing heavily, and she observes a signal from Dr. Zek, and it's coming from her tablet, and it's screaming Robinson. So she puts her tablet down and she follows the voice. And Abby finds Zek lying unconscious, and she physically drags him back to the facility. And with the help of Robinson, Abby finally puts his almost dead body on the medical bed and they check up on him. Robinson exits the room and shuts the door behind him as Abby checks Dr. Zek. And Robinson binds Zek to his gurney while seeming dubious and saying that it's for their safety. And at night, as Abby was asleep, she gets a nightmare again, and when she wakes up, she sees that Robinson is watching her again. She screams, obviously, because she was not thinking that he'd be in her room just watching her by the window. Yeah. Anyways, he brings her clothes, and he tells her that he came because he heard her scream. And immediately, an alarm goes off, and both of them go to check it out. And when Abby checks the machine, she finds out that the cooling system, the fan, has stopped. At this point, she's feeling very scared and confused, and she tells Robinson to wait as she goes and checks things over. And after checking, she finds out that it's only one of the fans that stopped working, and she sees blood and teeth on the floor. She asks Robinson if he went in there, and he tells her that he didn't. And she tells him that it's now out of her hand, and she goes to send a request. Abby sends a request for an emergency repair team with the suggestion that she believes someone intentionally sabotaged the engine room. And then she goes to the room where they handcuff Dr. Zek, and she finds Robinson standing over him, claiming that Dr. Zek is very dangerous. And now she believes that Robinson is behind all of this, and she elects herself as his superior, and she sends him off. And as she was watching Dr. Zek throughout the night, she falls asleep, and then she also has a nightmare again. And when she wakes up, Zek comes out of his coma, and he tells Abby that Robinson is an imposter and that he's actually a terrorist. And he tells her not to say anything to him until they find out what he really wants. And Abby finds home movies of Robinson and his family, and she finds out that his family was poisoned by radiation. And she goes out into the desert to send a distress signal, and she returns to the infirmary and she releases Zek. Robinson then confronts both Zek and Abby, demanding that Zek tell Abby the truth about the Gibson Desert North facility. Zek claims that he doesn't know what Robinson is talking about, and then he attacks him with a laser, and he locks both Abby and Robinson inside the infirmary. Robinson then tells Abby that Zek is a lunatic who turned the entire facility into a bomb. Abby rewires the door so that they can escape, and while Robinson goes to look for Zek, Abby finds the real Robinson's body along with the imposter's family photos. Robinson finds Zek and the two men fight. Abby intervenes and fights with Robinson, and then Abby realizes that Robinson has radiation poisoning and that he's actually dying. And then he cuts off her finger and he uses it to access the deep burial chamber. Abby then condemns Zek when she concludes that he knew about the facility and that it's a danger to the surrounding environment. But Zek tells her that even the company Auxilison knows, but they don't care because they're keeping it deliberately quiet because the energy benefits were deemed more important than the residents of the surrounding area. And then Abby leaves Zek to fend for himself. And then she confronts Robinson in the containment chamber, and Robinson starts to mourn his dead wife and son before taking a lit flare and diving into the radiation core. And when he does that, the facility begins to crumble. Abby tries to run to the desert and escape, and the facility gets completely destroyed, and she gets killed by the resulting radiation cloud. Pretty sad. Yeah. And on the last scene, we see an Auxilison recovery team later finds Abby's corpse, and they bag her tablet alongside a bunch of other evidence. And that is pretty much how the movie ends. Do you think people figure out the truth about Auxilison, or do you think her death was completely in vain? Please leave your comments in the comment section, and also leave a like, and make sure to be back for my next recap. I will see you then. Bye!